Hi, this is Dr. Carl Goldkamp. If you're interested in learning about the ketogenic diet like I was, to save my own life, then this is probably the podcast for you. 8 years ago, I knew nothing about it. 6 years ago, it saved my life. 3 years ago, I started researching and talking with some of the authorities in the field and attending medical conferences about this to understand why and how keto so dramatically changed my and my wife's Judy's lives. The purpose of this podcast is to share our journey of discoveries with you in understanding how keto is so effective in improving so many different conditions, from obesity, epilepsy, diabetes, infertility, MS, Alzheimer's, heart disease, to name a few. So take a step away from all the hype you've probably heard and roll up your sleeves with me and join me weekly to explore this living miracle that anyone can access. We'll talk science, we'll talk food. We'll explore its history and evolution to today, which is that the sheer wonder of the ketogenic way of eating has changed untold number of lives, unlike anything before it. And in case I forget to mention it, please join our Facebook group, Keto Naturopath. Hi, welcome back to the next episode of the Keto Naturopath. I'm Dr. Carl Goldkamp, and welcome for coming back. Well, today I have a story for you, a personal story, but I think you're going to find it very helpful. You know, how I came to keto had nothing to do with weight loss, had nothing to do with mental clarity. God knows we could all use some, but I just didn't know I could use some, or if I was in need of it. So it wasn't part of that. I wasn't looking for anything special. I was actually working on saving my own life. If you need to learn my story, it's been on a number of podcasts and certainly have it up on video form a little bit to summarize it all. But it's this way. Back in 2012, come summer, there was a lot of calamity in our life. My mother had passed, and then my brother had passed. We had to submit to bankruptcy for our medical practice because we were in the sequelae, the follow-up, the damage of 2008. We had a big building and so on and so forth. And so there's a lot of financial stress. And what investments we had clearly tanked. So we were on the sandbar of a ruinous time. So in that environment, specifically starting with my brother's death in August of 2012, which was, he died from multiple myeloma, my only brother, the older brother. He was the head of criminal justice department at Temple University. He basically created the department for the previous 30 years. So in coming forward from that, thinking that, gosh, the world just crashed, all that we had. And my wife had a meningioma, a brain tumor that was impinging on her optic nerve, and she eventually lost the vision of her right eye. But we went through a number of very poor doctors, MDs, that had great titles. And eventually we found somebody who did do an MRI to diagnose that. And so she was headed for major brain surgery come a number of months off. So how I came to keto and how this has to do with anything is that my specific reason was kind of a few steps away from what I was trying to do. So I had severe Crohn's and colitis to the point that at the regional hospital in New London, Connecticut, called L&M or Lawrence Memorial, the gastroenterologist there said, it's the worst we've ever seen. And how we do it is we're going to give you 90 days, put you on steroids, and if things don't improve, then we really have to have you back for bowel resection, which means they clip out the bad parts, which usually means in the history of treating that surgically, it means they start clipping a little more and a little more and a little more to the point that you have removed yourself, your digestive processes by a lot. You just don't take out the bad parts, you take out the function those bad parts have. So that was in my offing, and I obviously had 90 days on steroids, and that's a trip, by the way. When you have to be on high level of steroids on a regular basis, a couple things happen. Certainly you gain weight. You know, you self-induced high glucose, which is amps up the insulin, so on and so forth. But not only that, you head towards a kind of a psychosis. you come closer to a kind of eggshell-like existence in terms of emotional ability to be dynamic at all. You grow despondent and you grow angry, and you are aware of that, but you have to fight that off. So that's out there as a side effect of high level of steroids for a prolonged period of time. And it's also well documented. That's not a personal story. So I knew I was headed in that direction. I wasn't quite to that extreme, but I'm now going back in my mind saying, what did I miss in medical school? What did I not understand? What am I not applied to Crohn's and colitis? And so I remember, I don't know if I had any of my notes from back then, even though everybody, when they graduate, they keep all their tomes of notebooks thinking they're going to come back to get all this information. Never happens. You basically just start researching again on whatever you're working on. So I remember from one of my favorite professors, Dr. Eric Jones, and we were in gastroenterology. And one of the things you gave people for kind of a lot of conditions, but it was about controlling, was for UC, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, and even, which was a very popular diagnosis in the late 90s, was Candida albicans. Candida albicans. Okay, so for these things, and one of the treatments, and there was plenty of treatments, was caprylic acid triglyceride. So caprylic acid is otherwise known as C8 triglyceride. It's 8-carbon fatty acid, and you can buy it it's over the counter. You can buy it as capsules. And so I was thinking after I had left this gastroenterologist, is like, I wonder what component of my inflammatory process was fungal. My mind was kind of prejudiced towards a fungal etiology, a fungal cause of Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. So I thought, well, I remembered this particular treatment, though I don't think I had really used it on anybody. Anyways, it's just in tablets. It's in like vitamin E pills, if you will. And that's how you would recommend it to people. So I thought, okay, well, I'll start there. So I ordered some, online at the same pharmacy we still use today. And I don't know if that was helpful or not, but I also encouraged him. I said, hey, how about we do an experiment? And they're much more liberal thinking in the Northwest, in Washington, where I went to school at Bastyr. And so you actually had access to things like nystatin and so on and so forth. Whereas in Connecticut, you did not. You had a very stripped down, almost very limited scope of practice completely. So I couldn't just sort of say, hey, could you order nystatin for me? Which is really what I said. And eventually he did. And a couple of things were happening here. I was progressively starting to get more and more anemic because the steroids that I was on, if anybody knows steroids, if you think of the fight or flight, right, we're inducing a chronic stress. We're inducing the bear is after you need to save your life every minute of every day. And what that actually does, what that kind of stress, even though it's meant to be acute, not chronic, short term, so you can run away from the thing that's endangering your life, that acute stress, that flourish of cortisol that drives up your sugar and so on and so forth. The sugar is there for your muscles to use. That's why the sugar goes up with cortisol. I mean, it is a survival benefit, and it absolutely is a benefit in the acute administration, in the acute situation. So what happens with steroids, other things as well, is it tends to reduce blood clotting. Right? So they're saying if the bear is after you, you just want to run and you want your blood to flow. We don't want it to clot. So it's the opposite of blood clotting. It gives you sugar for the muscles. It dilates your blood vessels, and it gives you unclotted or minimally clotted blood. So that's it. So that all works in the short term, but in the long term, that's not a good thing, because if you cut yourself or if there's any particular open wound, it doesn't stop bleeding. It continuously bleeds. So when people are on steroids for a long period of time, like I was for at least 3 months, that your gut It's not just a leaky gut, it's a steroid-induced leaky gut. There's no clotting, very little clotting ability. So consequently, it was a steroid-induced anemia. I was losing blood through my butt, through my stool, and it was getting dangerously low, to the point that within the end of the first month on steroids, my hematocrit, for those who know about hematocrits, was down to 15. Actually, it was down to 19, and it did go to 15 in the next couple of weeks. So for those who know, let me give you a reference range to that. So the hematocrit is just the amount of volume of blood in your veins. It's the red blood cells, white blood cells, it's everything. It's like bath water. It's the bath water of your serum. It just measures it. This is how big it is. It doesn't break it down in anything. It's kind of undifferentiated, but it's a good gross sort of number to use for a reference. And so the average person has about 9 cups, nearly 5 liters of blood. You could argue of 5 liters, 9 cups. 10 cups is 5 liters. 9 cups is a cup less than 5 liters. So in that neighborhood, call it 9 to 10 cups. Whereas down to a hematocrit of 15 is 3 cups of blood. So in other words, I had lost roughly, over 85% of my blood. So it's hard to operate with very little blood. You can't imagine. I mean, your mind is still there because that's obviously all the steroids are saying keep the mind alive. The mind has to think to get out of this emergency, right? Now this emergency due to steroids induced thinking is every minute of every day. And so your brain is kind of a priority. So it's given all the goodies. But you go, okay, I gotta go upstairs to get something. Your legs don't work. There's not enough blood for your muscles to move your leg to go upstairs to get that thing, or even to go to bed. So for me, I was unable to go upstairs, which is where our bedroom was. So I had to sleep downstairs. And every so often I would take a bath. Here's an example. I'm kind of a bath guy. I took a bath, and that was a process. Getting out of the bathtub and now being exposed to all that heat, which drives your blood to the surface, but it makes it seem like you have, in essence, less blood. I would have to lie down on the bathroom floor on a towel and lie there for the better part of an hour or two. So, and then it got to be my normal resting pulse was 140 beats a minute. So that's what they call tachycardia. That's kind of the borderline of tachycardia. So that's where less and less blood goes. And so now I knew I was kind of on a emergency. So this 90 days thing was getting to be kind of an iffy situation that I had to address. And so I went back and I really started from Chinese medicine. I went back into all that I knew to say, what do I need to do? So I followed up on taking caprylic acid triglyceride. And then I found out, that it wasn't available in any sort of tub as a liquid that it is now is, but coconut oil was. And so I would get coconut oil, which is C10 and C8. And so that was better than nothing. And I just started scooping that down. Plus I started ordering more and more and more of C8. And so, and with this nystatin, I started to feel better. Some of the numbers started to change a little bit. Then the doctor said, well, this is an off-label use of nystatin, which is an incredibly benign medication. So I have to stop. He was saying, I don't feel comfortable in prescribing. So I'm getting better. My numbers are getting better. And he takes away the nystatin. Boom. So now I'm completely dependent on caprylic acid triglyceride, mostly in capsule form because there was no other way to take it. So it's like, I wasn't going crazy. Nobody else had really told me about this. I was on thin ice. It wasn't any sort of precedent of, certainly none of my naturopathic colleagues were saying, hey, yeah, you just scoop it down. This is going to save your life. They're saying, no, it seems a bit extreme. So they were saying, no, I think they're going too far. So in my search for, what are the things that makes your colon work better and better, it was a thing called butyrate. And there was a thing called butyrate enemas, which is what you put up your rectum. And the idea was it was an immediate anti-inflammatory. And I never got that. I couldn't, you needed a prescription for that in the state of Connecticut, but there again in Washington, you could get it. So if I flew to Washington as a naturopath from Connecticut, I could order it for myself, or in Oregon, or in Arizona, or in California, but not in Connecticut. A bit of an aside. So it wasn't something I could reach for, but I was going caprylic acid, triglyceride, and butyrate. So I started doing a lot of research and found out, well, this ketogenic diet, which has been around since the early 1920s, creates beta-hydroxybutyrate. So is beta-hydroxybutyrate the same as butyrate that is the preferred, they call the preferred fuel for your large intestine, the large colon. In other words, it's going to be the thing that feeds the tissue that's going to make it a healthy large intestine, not so much the small intestine, but they'll kind of work together. So, I go, all right, the ketogenic diet. What do I need to do? I could actually make my butyrate was the idea. Instead of now I can't buy it, I can make it. So I started researching the ketogenic diet, still while taking caprylic acid triglyceride in capsule form, not so much as kind of like minimal. Everybody's kind of like, I think you're going too far. You're going to like mess up your liver. What are you going to go into ketosis? This is before, the ketogenic conferences at all. This is the only reference you knew of keto was relative to pediatric epilepsy. For that, and a lot of people said that the diet was too extreme. They couldn't do it, so they went on the medications, which were terrible. So here I am looking into the ketogenic diet, researching it, which was kind of coming into a renaissance since the 1990s under the Charlie Foundation, Charlie Abrams for his son Charlie, not Charlie Abrams, Jim Abrams for his son Charlie. And, but it was becoming a little more familiar, but it was still not very familiar. Certainly we never learned anything about this in naturopathic medical school. So again, I was on my own. I was making bone broth because I heard that was good for your gut. And so, I knew that generally and had encouraged other people to do that as well. So we're making jars of bone broth. And that was kind of my existence. Not necessarily getting worse, but not getting better. And actually, I was starting to slide back down and my hematocrit was going back to getting worse. So I was questionable. So the ketogenic diet, I started because I wanted butyrate. And beta-hydroxybutyrate, in my view now, is pretty much identical to the butyrate, which is a preferred fuel. And that's why keto, if you really are in ketosis, it means you really are making beta-hydroxybutyrate. You're also making acetoacetate, and you're also making acetone. Those are the three ketone bodies that you are making. So they are tremendously anti-inflammatory, especially for the gut. So now I've found a way to hack, I hate that word, but I'm using it, to hack, to find a shortcut to making my butyrate instead of going out there trying to find it someplace. You could buy some supplements that were kind of various forms of the butyrate, and it would smell awful. So there was that, but I felt I had my own source now. I also started, about 2 months into it, I realized I needed to change doctors because this guy was not following me very closely. I would actually have to ask him for, can you give me a script for CBC? You can't give yourself a script for your own blood work, and the public access going in and ordering your own blood work wasn't available at that time. So he was arguing with me about getting CBCs, which I wanted to get, but that's about your hematocrit and other parameters because I wanted to track this. And he started feeling that I was micromanaging. I was saving my life. So I went to another gastroenterologist who looked at my blood work and said, yeah, you need transfusions. Gave me 4 transfusions in the course of a week. You don't give them all at one time. So 2 one day, and came back 2 days later and got 2 another day. So that's 4 pints of blood. So it's a pint per transfusion. So now I got this, wow, my brain's got blood, my body's got blood. I'm renting this body now that just, for the next little while. So with this newfound energy, I then went to a number of gastroenterology conferences for conventional medicine. One was on FMT, fecal microbiota transplant, was in University of Chicago, downtown Chicago. So I went off there, flew out there for that 3-day conference, and I'd already known who the international major researchers were. They were Australia, Dr. Thomas Brody, and those from the Netherlands, and got to meet this plethora of international doctors as well as some American, but it was very clear that the American component, the AMA that was present there, and even the FDA was there, to make sure that nobody's going to go nuts with using FMT, fecal microbiota transplant, now just called FT, fecal transplant. And so it's almost like guards at the door kind of thing. But they were very negative. They were saying, oh, this is, you can get yourself into a lot of trouble. You can make yourself very sick. You can even kill yourself. That was their point. Whereas everybody else was saying, do you believe all these things that, it's tremendously helpful. They've been doing it for decades, especially from Australia and the Netherlands. So when I came back from that, I then attended another conference down in Miami. They kind of followed up on that same thing and more of the same speakers. So I got to know them. We're now email pals to an extent. I was really feeling that I knew what I was doing. And I began using my wife as a donor for FT every day for 3 months, 5 days a week. So why do I tell you this story relative to keto microbiome, MCT oil, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis? It's because what I find is that one of the reasons keto does work is it's as an anti-inflammatory, beta-hydroxybutyrate primarily, we believe right now. So it is an anti-inflammatory. Who's doing the heavy lifting of that, whether it's BHB or acetoacetate or acetone? It's most of the agreement is around BHB. And so that was the existence. And so now learning more about caprylic acid triglyceride, I learned that, well, actually it's taken up by the liver, and the liver makes the ketones from, so I in essence was taking a nearly exogenous ketone, which was a good thing that kind of self-discovered. But the reason that the reason MCT oil and these capsules of caprylic acid triglyceride were being used was as an antifungal treatment. So I believe one of the reasons the ketogenic diet works so well when we talk about low carb is because a high carb diet is the source, whether it's sugar or refined carbohydrates you choose. It is the source of fungus, bad yeast in your gut. That is the source. And so a couple of things, you have that. So now when you're taking caprylic acid triglyceride, and I was taking it as an antifungal, but really so that in itself, C8 on the way to the liver to be taken up and to be digested and come back out as ketones was an antifungal by itself. So that was correct thinking at that time. And the bonus was that it then was not only just exposed and the degree that I was correct about fungal being part of the, I can't remember my diet, but I'm sure with all that stress, it was plenty of, I was probably letting go of a lot of things. Oh, well, why did it all fall apart? My life, so to say, our lives. So I really wasn't following anybody's rules. So I'm sure it was a terrible diet in terms of refined carbs and so on and so forth, and the stresses we had. So it all fed into that. And the stress that we had was cortisol driven as well. And that gave more sugar, and that gave more reason to have a fungal infection. So however I got to caprylic acid triglyceride, it was the thing that turned it around because it was an antifungal. It was the one thing that was treating directly the worst gut symptom I had, which was tremendous inflammation, by getting rid of, making it an antifungal environment. So that was a big deal. Then when the ketones were produced by the C8, caprylic acid triglyceride, the ketones were tremendous anti-inflammatory. So to that, when you add the bone broth and so on and so forth, we got down the primary cause of inflammation. And then with the microbiome transplant, how I had gotten there before, I had a number of antibiotics right before this whole stressful situation because I had had Lyme disease before and all that. So all these things fed into a very bad microbiome. So I borrowed the microbiome from my wife, who has not had all these antibiotics. That didn't work out in the woods that much to get Lyme disease in Connecticut. So that was a good source. I don't think she had antibiotics since she was a kid. So I, on the other hand, had, because of Lyme, 5 bouts of Lyme disease. So my gut was pretty much torched. So it all went together in a very beneficial way. And so I stayed on. We really started taking, reading now as much as I could. There was just a couple short books out on sort of addressing why low carb makes sense, but there was no ketogenic diet. You had to really research all this and start putting these things together for yourself. So I came to keto looking for an antifungal approach. And what I got was the bonus that CA, yes, indeed, is antifungal. But the bonus was that it then became a hugely anti-inflammatory supplement once it was ingested by the liver and converted to those 3 ketone bodies, primarily the BHB. So that was a win-win. So with that, I got deep into understanding about microbiome. And let me give you a visual image of microbiome. We tend to simplify things, certainly in the United States, maybe worldwide, but I think we're the height of oversimplification. And it's not so much we're idiots. It's because we are so overexposed to marketing. And marketing tends to simplify, hey, you just do this one thing and your life is going to be so good. All you have to need to do is just do this, take this pill, do this thing, go visit this, whatever it is. And it's that life isn't that way. Sorry. It's not, life is a little more gray, if you will, than that, a little more discretion and a little more idiocentricity is involved. You need to find the difference from person to person. But here's the visual that I want to give you. Here's a glass of water, and you have a dropper, and it has dark blue ink in it, and you do one drop into the glass of water. You can see that dissolve, right? You can see that little cloud of blue starting to fall to the bottom and get diluted. And you think when you take a supplement, which is what that drop of blue is, it's all going to react the same way. It's all going to dissolve the same way. It's not. And the reason it's not is because we have different glasses of water. Your glass of water, and the glass of water now represents your microbiome. Your microbiome is not the same kind of glass of water that mine is. And so how effective that will be or not effective that will be depends on what is in that glass of water. And if you are a high carb eater, or if you are a Inuit, or if you are an Aboriginal, you're going to have tremendously different microbiomes. And if I gave all these different people that one little drop, right, into that glass of water, we would see not only different rates of dissolving, we would see maybe sometimes it might not work at all. And so this is one of the secrets that I found in really going deep into microbiome. I got my microbiome tested, sent it out and bring it back, and actually took a course on from the University of San Diego on microbiome. I was really going to get into it. This is my way. If you're going to learn about it. Go deep, really go deep. Don't stay superficial. And so what I learned is that there are many different families of healthy microbiomes, but they have different varieties of bacteria, viruses, archaea, and what am I leaving out? And fungus. All those are components that have to be part of your microbiome, but when one gets the upper hand, they call it a dysbiosis. There's too much. So having fungus in my gut was not the thing. Having too much, an overgrowth of a particular fungus in my gut was the problem. You could say the same thing with certain bacteria. When there is an overgrowth, a dysbiosis of a certain bacteria, that's a dysbiosis. That is not a bad bacteria. So it's not looking for the right little things. We're not working with a piano key and saying, oh, I'm missing A sharp. I need a new A sharp key. No, we are looking for different pianos that have different ranges, and that's what it is. So if that's the analogy you want to go with, think of different pianos that actually have different keys, and they all get along fine in that particular microbiome on that particular piano. So to think that all the pianos have to sound the same, I know that's what piano tuners go by, but within this analogy of saying it's different pianos, we all have different keys. That's how that is. So there's enterotypes. Enterotype is another word, or entero is, I think it's Greek, about small intestine. And so your microbiome is mostly about your small intestine. This is where you do most of your digestion and so on and so forth. It's hard to get your microbiome transplant all the way up into the small intestine. That's impossible. I mean, they do it in hospitals. They go up with a a colonoscopy scope, and they deposit a small sample as close as they can with the idea they're going to repopulate the large intestine. And some of that helps, some of it sort of backflows through the cecum, the valve, but not really. And they actually have FT, fecal transplants, through what they call an NG tube, nasal gastro. So they put a tube up the nose, down through the stomach, obviously down the throat, down the stomach, into the top of the small intestine, because that's where they want to get it there. So if you can imagine that, so that's an NG tube, and that's how they deliver that. So you actually have to be pretty careful in pulling it out afterwards, because it has to go down obviously it doesn't go down the trachea, it goes down your throat. So the epiglottis has to be closed. So when you pull it out, there's a chance that you could have some residual contaminate your lungs, and that's a bad thing. So it's risky doing it that way. But the point was, they had, in order to get into the small intestine, the heart of the best place to put it in exchange. Then, of course, they've gone on to tablets, and they've gone on to all these other things, and it's certainly evolved from those dark days of 2012 and 2013, for sure. But that's it. That's how I came to the ketogenic diet. I didn't come for any other reason. And so the idea, and I've never heard many people talk about this at all, it's like it is a tremendous anti-inflammatory. So if for no other reason you stay into keto or on keto, get into nutritionally ketosis, become metabolically flexible. Sure, that's sort of a buzzword now. Be metabolically flexible. You can have fat as your fuel. You can have glucose, sugar as your fuel. That's true. That's true. And that's a good thing. Athletes crave that, especially if you're first, second, or third string lacrosse player or rugby player, and you just going. This is where you call on your fat reserves. But primarily, it is an incredibly great anti-inflammatory. So even if you jumped, so what would I do differently, knowing now there's exogenous ketones out there and so on and so forth, and I knew if all these things were happening, and I know what I know now about gut and the cause of a lot of dysbiosis and great gut inflammation. I would say start with exogenous ketones, work your way back to some MCT oil, and then they go put the MCT oil on your food and in your food, like making mayo. MCT oil, by the way, is very uncomfortable to take straight, so never do that. You're going to burn your stomach, you're going to feel cramps for the next little while, and then you're going to have a run to the bathroom. You're going to have loose stool. So don't do that. It's just like, don't be an idiot. You don't have olive oil that way. You don't have avocado oil that way. You don't have any other kind of oil that way. You put it on your food and in your food, because they would all pretty much have the same effect. So put it on your food and in your food. We have a video on making mayo. I think you ought to learn how to make your own mayo, which combines it obviously with egg yolks, and we use some avocado oil in there, or avocado or olive oil in there. And so that's how you mix it up so you can keep yourself comfortably in nutritional ketosis. So keto is a very big deal. I just have been so digesting this, no pun intended, for so long that I'm not tired of talking about it. It's become my norm. It's become like, oh, by the way, you do all know you're supposed to be breathing on a regular basis, because if you don't breathe, you will die. I mean, it's become such an ordinary assumption for a good, healthy body to be in nutritional ketosis as much as possible, that it's just that. It's that important. It's that fundamental now. It's part of a good constitution. That's where my belief is. Hard-earned. So I feel I'm doing pretty well, and I've come that track. And the thing about keto and carnivore and paleo, there's not really any research. Only now are you getting more sophisticated research coming out about using the ketogenic diet and sometimes exogenous ketones, because these things weren't available to really study much. But as a diet, the most studied diet is keto relative to epilepsy. Right? That's been around roughly 100 years. There's really no study on the Mediterranean diet. It's sort of like, oh, the Mediterranean diet, and one of its 1,000 different varieties of Mediterranean diet. What is that exactly? Well, it's pretty much plants, sort of little animals, and nobody really can come up with a really tight definition. So they go, oh, we compared this to the Mediterranean diet, and our version of it is this. Hopefully they'll say at least that. Anyway, I hope you catch my point, and I hope you got something out of this. The point I want to say is the part of the keto, and certainly MCT oil, and certainly caprylic acid triglyceride, we went on to make a product of that, by the way, because of this whole story, is that the whole gut anti-inflammatory, antifungal approach of a ketogenic diet is never mentioned. That alone, I don't care how heavy you are or how clouded your mind is, you do this, you clean up your gut, and poof, everything else changes. Your mind clears up, you drop the weight. So it really is the heart of the whole situation, in my view, because that's what digests everything. So if you're going on a ketogenic diet, you'll be eating things that are basically low carb, not even necessarily high fat, protein, and that's going to predispose you to a certain kind of microbiome, a certain sort of glass of water, if you will. Back to that analogy. Okay, so hope you got something out of it. Till next time, we'll talk. Bye-bye. All the best. Hi, this is Dr. Goldkamp again for a brief reminder of something I completely forget to do at the end of every episode. You've heard me talk long enough in many different episodes, but what I would love you to do, and many of you have already done this, I just want to reinforce this particular behavior, which is to send me your questions. Send me your questions and anything you have about keto. If there's something that I don't know, I will look it up. And if it's something that intrigues me, I will probably make an episode, a podcast about that particular topic. So what you need to do is to send me your questions at drgoldkamp@ketonaturopath.com. So that's DRGOLDKAMP at KETONATUROPATH.com. Dr. Goldkamp at ketonaturopath.com. Feel free to join our Facebook group, which is also ketonaturopath.com. That's been growing lately. You also have to answer a questionnaire should you choose to join. And I don't ask for your email. I ask that you follow our terms. I try to avoid advertising and the obvious interruptions of just a good Facebook group. So hope to see you at one place or other. Please send me your questions and look forward to talking to you and getting to know you. Take care.